scholars, right now, as we always do, you have a do now. They are 2 word problems. And so if I were you, I would have this video going side by side with the PowerPoint notes for today. And so that way you can do cubes. You can do cubes on the actual PowerPoint instead of having to copy down the word problem. So you've got 2 problems here. You're going to take a minute, answer it, put the answers here in the Nearpod, and then I'll be back on with the solutions. Okay. So first we have a skier descended a mountain at a rate of 14 feet per second. What was his total change in elevation after 8 seconds? So we should have 14 and 8 circled. The question we're underlining is what was his total change in elevation after 8 seconds? And our keywords that we should box are descended, which tells us that 14 should be negative, and per, which narrows it down to multiplication or division. So if we're not sure if it's multiplication or division, that's when we draw our model, right over here. And so in 1 second, the skier goes down 14 feet. And then the next second, 14 feet, so on and so forth. And so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 seconds and 8 14s, which means we have to multiply negative 14 times 8. We get negative 112, but remember, word problems require context. So the context here is the skier descended 112 feet after 8 seconds. Our second question is, after 8 hours of snow, the temperature had changed by a total of negative 16 degrees. What was the average change in temperature each hour while it was snowing? Okay, so we circle 8 and negative 16. We underline what was the average change in temperature each hour while it was snowing. And then we box each, right? And each narrows it down to multiply or divide. So I'm not sure, so I drew my model over here, and we can see that here is the amount of time that it snowed, which was 8 hours, and it dropped to negative 16 degrees. So I'm not interested in the 8 hours, I'm interested in how much happened in one of these hours. So I have to split the 8 hours into 1 hour segments. So here, that means that if I'm splitting it, that means I'm dividing. So negative 16 divided by 8 means it was a negative 2, which when I put it into the context of the word problem means the temperature dropped 2 degrees each hour. Our objective for today is that students will be able to use the order of operations to solve addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division word problems. So we're putting it all together and we're talking about the order of operations. Okay? So I'm asking you in this slide, do you remember PEMDAS, or please excuse my dear Aunt Sally? That's the way math teachers have been teaching the order of operations for a really, really long time. And each of those letters stands for something, but sometimes we get so caught up in the acronym that we forget how important it is to really understand the order of operations. So P, we usually just say P is for parentheses, E is for exponents, M is for multiply. But instead, I kind of want to dive deeper into it and make sure we really understand what is it saying here. P doesn't really just mean parentheses, it means evaluate expressions within parentheses first. E then means we evaluate exponents. And instead of thinking of the M and then D, it's really together, M or D. Because when we work from left to right, we perform multiplication and division. So it doesn't matter which one comes first, we go from left to right the same way that we read. And the same thing is true for addition and subtraction. We work from left to right, performing addition and subtraction. Okay? In your notes, you should have your SWABOT, and you should have this guy copied. Here is our first example. Go ahead and copy it in your notes. This is my example, so I'm just going to work on it on my own. And just like we do with cubes, I'm just going to remind myself of PE, MD, AS. All right? So the first thing I look for, do I have any expressions inside parentheses? And I do. I have 2 minus 10. So I am going to write down 2 minus 10, and I see a minus sign, so that means that I have to LCO. So inside the parentheses, I have 2 plus negative 10. So we find the absolute value of 2 is 2, the absolute value of 10 is 10, and I have to subtract them. 10 minus 2. Well, here that means that it's 8, and the number with the higher absolute value is negative, so it's negative 8. So after I get done with that, I bring down everything else. Negative 13 plus negative 4 times negative 8 plus 8. I check to see if there's any other expressions inside parentheses, and there aren't. The only thing that are in parentheses are my negative numbers, so I'm done with parentheses. I check to see if there are any exponent expressions. Not today. And now I go from left to right, seeing if there's any multiplication or division. Here's the plus sign. Oh, here's the multiplication sign. So I have to do negative 4 times negative 8. That's 32. And a negative is a positive. So now I have negative 13 plus 32 plus 8. I'm going to write it again over here so I have space. Okay, so I'm just going to take this 2 integers at a time. I find the absolute value of negative 13 and the absolute value of 32. They are different signs, so I have to subtract them. And the number with the larger absolute value is positive, so my answer is positive 19, and I bring down my plus 8. So the 19 plus 8, I can use some mental addition here, is 27. And there's my answer. I know that this looks like a lot of work, and I understand that you all are going to be writing a lot of steps, right? All of the steps. And I know that putting it in the calculator would make it way easier. But again, this is about understanding the rules of the order of operation when we're just dealing with whole numbers. Because when we start looking at expressions and understanding how we work expressions or equations, we have to understand this order. So I'm asking you, please try to stay away from the calculator until the end to check your answers. All right, let's do another example. Let's do negative 9 minus 32 divided by 4 minus 21. Well, here I'm seeing a lot of minus signs. So I'm actually going to LCO before I do anything else. Okay, so if I LCO, I've got to LCO this guy. And I have to LCO this guy. So I have negative 9 plus negative 32 divided by 4 plus negative 21. And now that we've got LCO taken care of, we can start thinking about our order of operations. Here, there are no expressions inside parentheses, so I don't have to worry about that. There are no expressions where I have to evaluate exponents. So now I have to see whether or not there's any multiplication or division. So I move from left to right, and I'm looking, and here I have division. Negative 32 divided by 4. 32 divided by 4 is 8. They're different signs, so it's negative 8. And I bring down everything else. Negative 9 plus negative 21. I don't see any other multiplication or division. And now I just move from left to right, going through each of these integers to add and subtract. I do negative 9 plus negative 8 first. They're the same sign, so I add the values. That's 17, and I keep the sign, which is negative 17. Bring down my negative 21, and I'll just write it over here again. Find the absolute values. They're the same signs, negative 17 and negative 21, so I add them. I get 38, and the answer is negative. Again, you can see there are lots of steps to be writing down. And that's what I'm looking for on your exit ticket when you submit it. right, let's do one more example where you just follow along with me. Okay, we have -5 plus the quantity of 8 minus 12 times -4. Okay, I'm going to remind myself of the steps. Okay, I'm going to look for anything that I need to LCO first. I've got something to LCO here, so I'm going to write -5 plus parentheses 8 plus -12 times -4. So we have, after we LCO, now we can see whether or not there's anything in parentheses to do. There is. It's 8 plus -12. So I find the absolute value of 8. I find the absolute value of 12. They're different signs, so I have to subtract them. 12 minus 8 is 4. And -12 has a higher absolute value, so that means that my answer here is -4. So then I'm going to write up over here on the top, I have -5 plus -4 times -4. Well, the next thing I have to do is check for some exponents. I don't see any of those right now. And now I look for any multiplication or division. The only thing I see is multiplying. -4 times -4. So I have -5 plus -4 times -4 is positive 16. So now I'm left with one more part of this expression. So I'm going to find the absolute value of -5 and 16. They're different signs, so I have to subtract them. 16 has the higher absolute value, so that means that my answer is positive 11. Okay, so here are 3 expressions for you to solve on your own. All right. The video is going to pause. You're going to have a chance to put in your answers, and then the video will come back on with the solutions. All right, so here are the solutions to our practice problems. Let's start by looking at 14 plus 8 minus 9 times 6. Well, here I LCO first, and so it changes to 14 plus 8 plus -9 times 6. There are no expressions inside parentheses, and there are no expressions using exponents. So I'm left with multiplication or division. I multiply -9 times 6, which is -54. And then I have 14 plus 8 plus -54. Which leaves me with 22 plus -54. I find those absolute values, and because they're different signs, I subtract them, which is right here. And 54 minus 22 is 32. -54 has the higher absolute value, so my answer is -32. Next we have the quantity of -25 minus 5 divided by 6 minus 21. We're going to LCO first, and I'm going to LCO what's inside the parentheses to -25 plus -5 divided by 6 plus -21. Now, inside parentheses, I have -25 plus -5. Those are the same sign, so I add them and keep the sign. So I have -30 divided by 6 plus -21. There are no expressions with exponents today, so I move on to multiplying and dividing. There's no multiplying, so I go to dividing, and I divide -30 by 6. I get -5, and I bring down my plus -21. They're the same sign, so I add them and keep the sign. And finally, I have -14 minus the quantity of 3 plus 3 times 2. Now here, you might be tempted to LCO right away, but I'm not going to LCO right away. I'm instead going to do what's inside the parentheses first, because it's hard to understand what to LCO when you've got something in parentheses. Like, what is the opposite? So I'm just going to wait. So I do what's in parentheses first, 3 plus 3, which is 6. And now I have negative 14 minus 6 times 2. Well, now it's much easier to LCO. So now I do negative 14, change the minus sign to a plus sign, and the opposite of 6 is negative 6 times 2. So now I have multiplying negative 6 times 2, which is negative 12. I have negative 14 plus negative 12. They're the same sign, so I add them and keep the sign. The answer here is negative 26. All right, so your exit ticket today is in Schoology. You're going to complete the exit ticket, and you're going to work out all of your solutions on your own sheet of paper. The last question of your exit ticket is asking you to take a picture of your work on your own sheet of paper and submit that file. Your submission is not complete until you have a sheet of paper, a picture in Schoology. All right, if you have any questions, you know where to find me.